Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. Page 49. Year of the Depend Adult Undergarment. Here's Hal in Candenza, age 17, with his little brass one-hitter getting covertly high in the Enfield Tennis Academy's underground pump room and exhaling palely into an industrial exhaust fan. It's the sad little interval after afternoon matches and conditioning, but before the Academy's communal supper. Hal is by himself down here, and nobody knows where he is or what he's doing. Hal likes to get high in secret, but a bigger secret is that he's as attached to the secrecy as he is to getting high. A one-hitter, sort of like a long FDR-type cigarette holder, whose end is packed with a pinch of good dope, gets hot and is hard on the mouth. The brassed ones especially, but one-hitters have the advantage of efficiency. Every particle of ignited pot gets inhaled. There's none of the incidental second-hand type smoke from a party bowl's big load, and Hal can take every iota way down deep and hold his breath forever, so that even his exhalations are no more than slightly pale and sick-sweet smelling. Total utilization of available resources equals lack of publicly detectable waste. The Academy's tennis court's lungs pump room is underground and accessible only by tunnel. ETA is abundantly and branchingly tunneled. This is by design. Plus, one-hitters are small, which is good, because let's face it, anything you use to smoke high-resin dope with is going to stink. A bong is big, and its stink is going to be like commensurately big. Plus, you have the foul bong water to deal with. Pipes are smaller and least portable, but they always come with only a multi-hit party ball that disperses non-utilized smoke over a wide area. A one-hitter can be wastelessly employed, then allowed to cool, wrapped in 2 baggies, and then further wrapped and sealed in a Ziploc, and then enclosed in 2 sport socks in a gear bag, along with a lighter and eye drops and mini pellets and the little film case of dope itself. And it's highly portable and odor-free and, basically, totally covert. As far as Hal knows, colleagues Michael Pemulis, Jim Struck, Bridget C. Boone, Jim Trolsch, Ted Schatz, Trevor Axford, and possibly Kyle D. Coyle and Tol Paul Shaw, and remotely possibly Franny Unwin, all know Hal gets regularly, covertly high. It's also not impossible that Bernadette Longley knows, actually, and of course the unpleasant Kay Freer always has suspicions of all kinds. And Hal's brother Mario knows a thing or two, but that's it, in terms of public knowledge. But even though Pemulis and Struck and Boone and Trolsch and Axford, and occasionally in a sort of medicinal or touristic way, Steese and Schott, are all known to get high also, Hal has actually gotten actively high only with Pemulis on the rare occasions he's gotten high with anybody else, as in person, which he avoids. He'd forgot Ortho, the darkness Steese, of Partridge KS knows. And Hal's oldest brother, Orrin, mysteriously, even over long distance, seems to know more than he's coming right out and saying, unless Hal's reading more into some of the phone comments than are there. Hal's mother, Mrs. Averill Incandenza, and her adoptive brother, Dr. Charles Tavis, the current ETA headmaster, both know Hal drinks alcohol sometimes, like on weekend nights with Trolsch or maybe Axford down the hill at clubs on Commonwealth Avenue. The unexamined life has its notorious blind bouncer every Friday night, where they card you on the drinking, mostly because of the way his father had drunk when alive, and reportedly his father's own father before him in Arizona and California. But Hal's academic precocity and especially his late competitive success on the junior circuit, make it clear that he's able to handle whatever modest amounts she's pretty sure he consumes. There's no way someone can seriously abuse a substance and perform at top scholarly and athletic levels. The athletic part, well, the ETA psych counselor Dr. Rusk assures her, especially the high-level athletic part. And Avril feels it's important that a concerned but unsmothering single parent know when to let go somewhat, and let the two high-functioning of her three sons make their own possible mistakes and learn from their own valid experience, no matter how much the secret worry about mistakes tears her gizzard out, the mother's. And Charles supports whatever personal decisions she makes in conscience about her children. And God knows she'd rather have Hal having a few glasses of beer every so often than absorbing God alone knows what sort of esoteric designer compounds with reptilian Michael Pemulus and Trail of Slime leaving James Struck, both of whom give Avril a howling case of the maternal phantods. And ultimately, she's told Doctors Rusk and Tavis she'd rather have Hal abide in the security of the knowledge that his mother trusts him, that she's trusting and supportive and doesn't judge or gizzard tear or wring her fine hands over his having, for instance, a glass of Canadian ale with friends every now and again, and so works tremendously hard to hide her maternal dread of his possibly ever drinking like James himself or James's father. All so that Hal might enjoy the security of feeling that he can be upfront with her about issues like drinking and not feel he has to hide anything from her under any circumstances. Dr. Tavis and Dolores Rusk have privately discussed the fact that not least among the phobic stressors Avril suffers so uncomplainingly with is a black phobic dread of hiding or secrecy in all possible forms with respect to her sons. Avril and CT know nothing about Hal's penchants for high-resin Bob Hope and underground absorption, which fact Hal obviously likes a lot on some level, though he's never given much thought to why. To why he likes it so much. ETA's hilltop grounds are traversable by tunnel. Avril, the first, for example, who never leaves the grounds anymore, rarely travels above ground, willing to hunch to take the off tunnels between Headmaster's house and her office next to Charles Tavis's, in the Community and Administration Building, a pink-bricked, white-pillared Neo-Georgian thing that Hal's brother Mario says looks like a cube that has swallowed a ball too big for its stomach. 2 sets of elevators and 1 of stairs run between the lobby, reception area, and administrative offices on ComAd's first floor, and the weight room, sauna, and locker shower areas on the sub-level below it. 1 large tunnel of elephant-colored cement leads from just off the boys' shower to the mammoth laundry room below the West Courts, and 2 smaller tunnels radiate from the sauna area south and east to the sub-basements of the smaller spherocubular proto-Georgian buildings, housing classrooms and sub-dormitories B and D. These 2 basements and smaller tunnels often serve as student storage space and hallways between various protectors' private rooms. Then 2 even smaller tunnels, navigable by any adult willing to assume a kind of knuckle-dragging simian posture, in turn connect each of the sub-basements to the former optical and film development facilities of Leith and Ogilvy and the late Dr. James O. Incandenza, now deceased. Below and just west of the headmaster's house, from which facilities there's also a fair diameter tunnel that goes straight to the lowest level of the Community and Administration Building, but its functions have gradually changed over 4 years, and it's now too full of exposed wiring and hot water pipes and heating ducts to be really passable, and to the offices of the physical plant almost directly beneath the center row of ETA outdoor tennis courts, which offices and custodial lounge are in turn connected to ETA's lung storage and pump rooms via a pargeted tunnel hastily constructed by the Testar All-Weather Inflatable Structures Corporation, which, together with the folks over at AT HSCME industrial air displacement devices erects and services the inflatable dendrourethane dome known as the lung that covers the middle row of courts for the winter indoor season. The crude little rough-sided tunnel between plant and pump is traversable only via all-fours type crawling and is essentially unknown to staff and administration. Popular only with the Academy's Smaller Kids Tunnel Club, as well as with certain adolescents with strong secret incentive to crawl on all fours. The lung storage room is basically impassable from March through November because it's full of intricately folded dendrourethane lung material and dismantled sections of flexible ducting and fan blades, etc. The pump room is right next to it, though you have to crawl back out into the tunnel to get to it. On the engineering diagrams, the pump rooms may be about 20 meters directly beneath the centermost courts in the middle row of courts and looks like a kind of spider hanging upside down. An unfenestrated oval chamber with 6 man-sized curved ducts radiating up and out to exit points on the grounds above. And the pump room has 6 radial openings, 1 for each up-curving duct. 3 2-meter vents with huge turbine-bladed exhaust fans bolted into their grills, and 3 more with 2 M's with reversible ATHS-CME intake fans that allow air from the ground above to be sucked down and around the room and up into the 3 exhaust vents. The pump room is essentially like a pulmonary organ or the epicenter of a massive 6-vectored wind tunnel, and when activated roars like a banshee that slammed its hand in a door. Though the PR is in full legit operation only when the lung is up, usually November through March. The intake fans pull ground-level winter air down into and around the room and through the 3 exhaust fans and up the outtake ducts into networks of pneumatic tubing in the lung sides and dome. It's the pressure of the moving air that keeps the fragile lung inflated. When the quartz lung is down and stored, Hal will descend and walk and then hunch his way in to make sure nobody's in the physical plant quarters. Then he'll hunch and crawl to the PR, gear bag in his teeth, and activate just one of the big exhaust fans and get secretly high and exhale palely through its blades into the vent so that any possible odor is blown through an outtake duct and expelled through a grilled hole on the west side of the west quartz. A threaded hole with a flange where brisk, white-suited ATHS-CME guys will attach some of the lung's arterial pneumatic tubing at some point soon when shit et al. On staff decide the real weather has moved past enduring for outdoor tennis. During winter months, when any expelled odor would get ducted up into the lung and hang there conspicuous, Hal mostly goes into a remote sub-dormitory lavatory and climbs onto a toilet in a stall and exhales into the grill of one of the little exhaust fans in the ceiling. But this routine lacks a certain intricate subterranean covert drama. It's another reason why Hal dreads Interdependence Day and the approach of the Whataburger Classic and Thanksgiving and unendurable weather and the erection of the lung. Recreational drugs are more or less traditional at any U.S. secondary school, maybe because of the unprecedented tensions, post-latency and puberty and angst and impending adulthood, etc., to help manage the intrapsychic storms, etc. Since the place's inception, there's always been a certain percentage of the high-caliber adolescent players at ETA who manage their internal weathers chemically. Much of this is good, clean, temporary fun, but a traditionally smaller and harder core set tends to rely on personal chemistry to manage ETA's special demands, dexedrine or low-volt methadrine before matches and benzodiazepines to come down after matches, with mudslides or blue flames at some understanding Calm Avenue night spot, or beers and bongs in some discreet academy corner at night to short-circuit the up and down cycle, mushrooms or eggs or something from the mild designer class, or maybe occasionally a little black star whenever there's a match and demand-free weekend to basically short out the whole motherboard and blow out the circuits and slowly recover and be almost neurologically reborn and start the gradual cycle all over again. This circular routine, if your basic wiring's okay to begin with, can work surprisingly well throughout adolescence and sometimes into one's early 20s before it starts to creep up on you. So, some ETAs, not just Hal and Candenza by any means, are involved with recreational substances, is the point. Who isn't at some life stage in the USA and interdependent regions in these troubled times for the most part? Though a decent percentage of ETA students aren't at all, i.e., involved. Some persons can give themselves away to an ambitious pursuit and have that be all the giving themselves away to something they need to do. Though sometimes this changes as the players get older and the pursuit more stress-fraught. American experience seems to suggest that people are virtually unlimited in their need to give themselves away on various levels. Some just prefer to do it in secret. An enrolled student's athlete's use of alcohol or illicit chemicals is cause for immediate expulsion, according to ETA's admissions catalog, but the ETA staff tends to have a lot more important stuff on its plate than policing kids who've already given themselves away to an ambitious competitive pursuit. The administrative attitude under first James Incandenza and then Charles Tavis is why would anybody who wanted to compromise his faculties chemically even come here to ETA, where the whole point is to stress and stretch your faculties along multiple vectors? And since it's the alumni protectors who have the most direct supervisory contact with the kids, and since most of the protectors themselves are depressed or traumatized about not making it into the show and having to come back to ETA and live in decent but subterranean rooms off the tunnels and work as assistant coaches and teach laughable elective classes, which is what the 8 ETA protectors do when they're not off playing satellite tournaments or trying to make it the qualifying rounds of some serious money event. And so, they're morose and low on morale and feel bad about themselves often, as a rule. And so also, not all that surprisingly, tend to get high now and then themselves. Though in a less covert or exuberant fashion than the hardcore students' chemical cadre. But, so given all this, it's not hard to see why internal drug enforcement at ETA tends to be flaccid. The other nice thing about the pump room is the way it's connected by tunnel to the prorector's rows of housing units, which means men's rooms, which means Hal can crawl, hunch, and tiptoe into an unoccupied men's room and brush his teeth with this portable Oral-B and wash his face and apply eye drops and Old Spice and a plug of wintergreen Kodiak and then saunter back to the sauna area and ascend to ground level looking and smelling right as rain. Because when he gets high, he develops a powerful obsession with having nobody, not even the neurochemical cadre, know he's high. This obsession is almost irresistible in its force. The amount of organization and toiletry lugging he has to do to get secretly high in front of a subterranean outtake vent in the pre-supper gap would make a lesser man quail. He broods on it abstractly sometimes when high. This no one must know thing. It's not fear per se, fear of discovery. Beyond that, it all gets too abstract and twined up to lead to anything. House brooding. Like most North Americans of his generation, Hal tends to know way less about why he feels certain ways about the objects and pursuits he's devoted to than he does about the objects and pursuits themselves. It's hard to say for sure whether this is even exceptionally bad, this tendency. At 00:15 hours, 2 April, the medical attaché's wife is just leaving the Mount Auburn Total Fitness Center, having played 5 6-game pro sets in her little Mideast diplomatic wife tennis circle's weekly round robin, then hung around the special Silver Key members' lounge with the other ladies, unwrapping her face and hair and playing nargis and smoking kiff and making extremely delicate and oblique fun of their husbands' sexual idiosyncrasies, laughing softly with their hands over their mouths. The medical attaché at their apartment is still viewing the unlabeled cartridge, which he has rewound to the beginning several times and then reconfigured for a recursive loop. He sits there, attached to a congealed supper, watching. At 20 hours, having now wet both his pants and the special recliner. 18 in May, Mario Incandenza's designated function around Enfield Tennis Academy is filmic. Sometimes during AM drills or PM matches, he'll be assigned by Coach Stitt et al. To set up an old camcorder or whatever video stuff's to hand on a tripod and record a certain area of the court, videotaping different kids' strokes, footwork, certain ticks and hitches and serves, or running volleys, so the staff can show the tapes to the kids instructionally, letting the kids see on the screen exactly what a coach or pro rector's talking about. The reason being, it's a lot easier to fix something if you can see it. Autumn, year of dairy products from the American heartland. Drug addicts driven to crime to finance their drug addiction are not often inclined toward violent crime. Violence requires all different kinds of energy, and most drug addicts like to expend their energy not on their professional crime, but on what their professional crime lets them afford. Drug addicts are often burglars, therefore. One reason why the home of someone whose home has been burglarized feels violated and unclean is that there have probably been drug addicts in there. Don Gately was a 27-year-old oral narcotics addict favoring Demerol and Talwin, and a more or less professional burglar, and he was himself unclean and violated, but he was a gifted burglar. When he burgled, though the size of a young dinosaur with a massive and almost perfectly square head he used to amuse his friends when drunk by letting them open and close elevator doors on, he was, at his professional zenith, smart, sneaky, quiet, quick, possessed of good taste and reliable transportation, with a kind of ferocious jolliness in his attitude toward his livelihood. As an active drug addict, Gately was distinguished by his ferocious and jolly elan. He kept his big square chin up and his smile wide, but he bowed neither toward nor away from any man. He took zero in the way of shit and was a cheery but implacable exponent of the don't get mad, get even school. Like, for instance, after he'd done a really unpleasant 3-month bit in Revere Holding on nothing more than a remorseless North Shore Assistant District Attorney's circumstantial suspicion, finally getting out after 92 days when his PD got the charges dismissed on a right to speedy brief, Gately and a trusted associate paid a semi-professional visit to the private home of this assistant DA, whose zeal and warrant had cost Gately a nasty impromptu detox on the floor of his little holding cell. Also a believer in the revenge is tastier chilled dictum, Gately had waited patiently until the Eye on People section of the Globe mentioned the ADA and his wife's presence at some celebrity charity sailing thing out in Marblehead. Gately and the associate went that night to the ADA's private home in the upscale Wonderland Valley section of Revere, killed the power to the home with a straight shunt in the meter's inflow, then clipped just the ground wire on the home's pricey HBT alarm, so that the alarm sound after 10 or so minutes and create the impression that the perps had somehow bungled the alarm and been scared off in the middle of the act. Later that night, when Revere's and Marblehead's finest summoned them home, the ADA and his wife found themselves minus a coin collection and 2 antique shotguns and nothing more. Quite a few other valuables were stacked on the floor of the living room off the foyer, like the perps hadn't had time to get them out of the house. Everything else in the burglarized home looked undisturbed. The ADA was a jaded pro. He walked around touching the brim of his hat and reconstructed probable events. The perps looked like they'd bungled disabling the alarm all the way and had got scared off by the thing's siren when the alarm's pricey HBT alternate ground kicked in at 300 volts. The ADA soothed his wife's sense of violation and uncleanliness. He calmly insisted on sleeping there in their home that very night. No hotel. It was like crucial to get right back on the emotional horse in cases like this. He insisted. And then, the next day, the ATA worked out the insurance and reported the shotguns to a buddy at ATF. And his wife calmed down and life went on. About a month later, an envelope arrived in the ADA's home's exquisite wrought iron mailbox. In the envelope were a standard American Dental Association glossy brochure on the importance of daily oral hygiene, available at like any dentist's office anywhere, and 2 high-pixel Polaroid snapshots, one of Big Don Gately and one of his associate, each in a Halloween mask denoting a clown's great good professional cheer, each with his pants down and bent over, and each with the enhanced focus handle of one of the couple's toothbrushes protruding from his bottom. Don Gately had sense enough never to work the North Shore again after that, but he ended up in hideous trouble anyway, ADA-wise. It was either bad luck or kismet or so forth. It was because of a cold, a plain old human rhinovirus. And not even Don Gately's cold is what made him finally stop and question his kismet. The thing started out looking like tit on a tray, burglary-wise. A beautiful neo-Georgian home in a widely upscale part of Brookline was set nicely back from an unlit pseudo-rural road. Had a chintzy Century Company alarm system that fed, idiotically enough, on a whole separate 330-volt AC 90 Hz cable with its own meter. Didn't seem to be on anything like a regular PM patrol route, and had, at its rear, flimsily tasteful French doors surrounded by dense and thorn-free deciduous shrubbery, and blocked off from the garage's halogen floods by a private EWD issue upscale dumpster. It was, in short, a real cocktease of a home, burglary-wise, for a drug addict. And Don Gately straight shunted the alarm's meter, and with an associate broke and entered and crept around on huge cat feet. Except, unfortunately, the owner of the house turned out to still be home, even though both of his cars and the rest of the family were gone. The little guy was asleep, sick in bed upstairs in acetate pajamas, with a hot water bottle on his chest, and half a glass of OJ and a bottle of NyQuil, and a foreign book and copies of international affairs and interdependent affairs, and a pair of thick specs in an industrial-sized box of Kleenex on the bedside table, and an empty vaporizer barely humming at the foot of the bed. And the guy was, to say the least, nonplussed to wake up and see high-filter flashlights crisscrossing over the unlit bedroom walls and bureau antique chiffonier, as Gately and associates scanned for a wall safe, which surprisingly, like 90% of people with wall safes, conceal in their master bedrooms behind some sort of land or seascape painting. People turned out so identical in certain root domestic particulars, it made Gately feel strangely sometimes, like he was in possession of certain overlarge private facts to which no man should be entitled. Gately had a way stickier conscience about the possession of some of these large particular facts than he did about making off with other people's personal merchandise. But then, all of a sudden, in mid-silent search for a safe, here's this upscale homeowner turning out to be home with a nasty head cold while his family's out on a 2-car foliage tour in what's left of the Berkshires, writhing groggily and nyquilized around on the bed and making honking adenoidal sounds and asking what in bloody hell is the meaning of this, except he's saying it in Quebec French, which means to these thuggish U.S. drug addicts in Halloween clown's mask exactly nothing. He's sitting up in bed, a little and older type homeowner with a football-shaped head and gray Van Dyke and eyes you can tell are used to corrective lenses as he switches on the bright bedside lamp. Gately could easily have screwed out of there and never looked back. But here indeed, in the lamplight, is a seascape, over next to the chiffonnier. And the associate had a quick peek and reports that the safe behind it is to laugh at. It can be opened with harsh language. Almost. And oral narcotics addicts tend to operate on an extremely rigid physical schedule of need and satisfaction. And Gately is at this moment firmly in the need part of the schedule. And so, D.W. Gately disastrously decides to go ahead and allow a non-violent burglary to become, in effect, a robbery, which the operative legal difference involves either violence or the coercive threat of same. And Gately draws himself up to his full menacing height and shines his flashlight in the little homeowner's rheumy eyes and addresses him the way menacing criminals speak in popular entertainment. D's for thuz, various apocopes, and so on, and takes hold of the guy's ear and conducts him down to a kitchen chair and binds his arms and legs to the chair with electrical cords neatly clipped from refrigerator and can opener and M Cafe brand automatic cafe au lait maker. Binds him just short of gangrenously tight, because he's hoping the Berkshire foliage is prime and the guy's going to be soloing in this chair for a good stretch of time. And Gately starts looking through the kitchen drawers for the silverware. Not the good silver for company silverware. That was in a calfskin case underneath some neatly folded old spare Christmas wrapping in a stunning hardwood with ivory inlay chest of drawers in the living room, where over 90% of upscale people's good silver is always hidden, and has already been promoted and is piled just off the foyer. But just the regular old everyday flatware silverware, because the vast bulk of homeowners keep their dish towels 2 drawers below their everyday silverware drawer, and God's made no better call for help-stifling gag in the world than a good old oily smelling fake linen dish towel. And the bound guy in the cords on the chair suddenly snaps to the implications of what Gately's looking for and is struggling and saying, "Do not gag me. I have a terrible cold. My nose, she is a brick of snot. I have not the power to breathe through the nose. For the love of God, please do not gag my mouth." And as a gesture of goodwill, the homeowner tells Gately, who's rummaging the combination of the bedroom's seascape safe, except in French numbers, which, together with the honking adenoidal inflection the guy's grip gives his speech, doesn't even sound like human speech to Gately. But also the guy tells Gately there are some antique pre-British takeover Quebecois gold coins in a calfskin purse taped to the back of the undistinguished Impressionist landscape in the living room. But everything the Canadian homeowner says means no more to poor old Don Gately whistling a jolly tune and trying to look menacing in his clown's mask than the cries of, say, North Shore gulls or inland grackles. And sure enough, the towels are 2 drawers under the spoons. And here comes Gately across the kitchen, looking like a sort of bozo from hell. And the Quebecois guy's mouth goes oval with horror, and into that mouth goes a balled-up, faintly greasy-smelling kitchen towel. And across the guy's cheeks and over the dome of protruding linen goes some fine-quality fibrous strapping tape from the drawer under the decommissioned phone. Why does everybody keep the serious mailing supplies in the drawer nearest the kitchen phone? And Don Gately and associate finish their swift, with the best of intentions, non-violent business of stripping the Brookline home as bare as a post-feral hamster meadow. And they relock the front door and hit the unlit road in Gately's reliable and double-mufflered 4x4, and the bound, wheezing, acetate-clad Canadian the right-hand man to probably the most infamous anti-ONAN organizer north of the Great Concavity, the lieutenant and troubleshooting trusted advisor who selflessly volunteered to move with his family to the savagely American area of Metro Boston to act as liaison between and general leaseholder for the half dozen or so malevolent and mutually antagonistic groups of Quebecer separatists and Albertan ultra-rightists, united only in their fanatical conviction that the USA's experialistic gift or return of the so-calledly reconfigured Great Convexity to its northern neighbor and Onan ally constituted an intolerable blow to Canadian sovereignty, honor, and hygiene. This homeowner, unquestionably a VIP, although admittedly rather a covert VIP, or probably more accurately, a PIT in French, the meek-looking Canadian terrorism coordinator, bound to his chair, thoroughly gagged, sitting there alone under cold fluorescent kitchen lights, the rhino-virally afflicted man, gagged with skill and quality materials, the guy having worked so hard to partially clear one clotted nasal passage that he tore intercostal ligaments in his ribs, soon found even that pinprick of air blocked off by mucus's implacable lava-like flow once again, and so has to tear more ligaments trying to breach the other nostril, and so on. And after an hour of struggle and flames in his chest and blood on his lips and on the white kitchen towel from trying frantically to tongue the towel out past the tape, which is quality tape, and after hopes skyrocketing when the doorbell rings, and then hopes blackly dashed when the person at the door, a young woman with a clipboard and chewing gum who's offering promotional coupons for Happy Holidays discounts on memberships of 6 months or more at a string of Boston non-UV tanning salons, shrugs in her parka and makes a mark on the clipboard and blithely retreats down the long driveway to the pseudo-rural road, an hour of this or more. Finally, the Quebecois PIT, after unspeakable agony, slow suffocation, mucoidal or no, being no day at the Montreal Tulip Fest, at the height of which agony, hearing his head's pulse as a receding thunder, and watching his vision's circle shrink as a red aperture around his sight rotates steadily in from the edges, at the height of which he could think only, despite the pain and panic, of what a truly dumb and silly way this was, after all this time, to die. A thought which the towel and tape denied expression via the rueful grin with which the best men meet the dumbest ends. This Guillaume Duplessis passed bluely from this life and sat there, in the kitchen chair, 250 clicks due east of some really spectacular autumn foliage, for almost 2 nights and days, his posture getting more and more military as rigor mortis set in, with his bare feet looking like purple loaves of bread from the lividity. And when Brookline's finest were finally summoned and got him unbound from the coldly lit chair, they had to carry him out as if he were still seated, so militarily comme il faut had his limbs and spine hardened. And poor old Don Gately, whose professional habit of killing power with straight shunts to a meter's inflow was pretty much a signature M.O., and who had, of course, a special place in the heart of a remorseless Revere, ADA, with judicial clout throughout Boston's 3 counties and beyond, and, of course, particularly remorseless ADA as of late, whose wife now needed Valium even just to floss, and was patiently awaiting his chance. The ADA was coldly biding his time, being a patient get-even and cold dish man, just like Don Gately, who was, through no will to energy-consuming violence on his part, in the sort of hell of a deep shit mess that can turn a man's life right around.